LASIP Society welcomes you to the Roundtable Conference. The theme for today is Challenges in the New Era of CSR India in the backdrop of the new GO government order. Today we are sitting on 6th of December 2014, Hyderabad. LASIP basically means Fountain of Knowledge, and the vision of LASIP is nurturing next generation governance globally. We exist in about close to 8 countries, and the key facts of our organization is advisory services, education and coaching, reach, spread and touching lives 21,000, 16,000 certifications, 3,700 capability assessments conducted. We believe in networking, open source knowledge base, and thought leadership. Basically, out of the Hyderabad chapter, we've created communities of practice, and the focus areas are quality and process management, human equity and change management, sustainability, and knowledge management. In fact, today's focus area is sustainability. I have the pleasure of inviting and introducing you to the panel speakers, S.R. Sriram, who's heading Human Capital and CSR at DE Shaw, Mangesh R. Gupte, Director CSR of Dr. Reddy's Labs. In fact, he was the panel chair. And K.S. Mani, Consultant Water Management, World Bank. I also have Venkatesh Parsuram, Founder and CEO of Ashu Networks, Mr. Shrikar, Vice President Palle Srujana, and Vivek Verma, Executive Director Kavi Insurance Repository and Chairman Rotary Foundation Miyapur. I would now like to invite Vivek to speak a little more about this particular roundtable conference on sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will take the first few minutes to introduce and talk a little about this particular topic, which is the challenges in the new era of CSR India in the backdrop of the new government order. In the last few months, I guess there's been a lot of discussion around a fantastic new initiative that the government has taken. And the sense we got talking amongst the panelists today is that probably there exists a lot of confusion, a lot of lack of clarity in the minds of people. And one of the things we decided to focus on today is to use this panel discussion to try and see if we can bring a little more clarity, which will then help us to decide in terms of the direction that we take going forward. So that's the context in which the panel met today, and I guess it was very, very exciting. A couple of hours that the panel contributed to this discussion, brought in a whole lot of different perspectives, and as you heard about the perspectives each of the panel brought because of the diverse experience and areas of expertise that they come from. So it's been an extremely exciting journey over the last couple of hours. I will now try and capture some of the essence that we discussed about this particular topic, which is the challenges in CSR and how do we look at things going forward. First, we looked at the SWOT, or the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats around this. We will start with the strengths. I guess one of the greatest things this new government order brings is that there is going to be a whole lot of partnership. There is going to be a whole lot of involvement of the community in a lot of these projects because of a lot more people getting involved, corporates getting involved. So the level of engagement will go up, and I think we clearly see that as a great strength. We also think that there is going to be a whole lot more subscription by all stakeholders to this particular government order. So it's no longer going to be seen as something that either one set of people or a few corporates or the government doing independently. I think there is going to be a whole lot of subscription to the spirit of the initiative, and not just in terms of lip service or in terms of just some numbers that people focus on. Another thing that we discussed as a panel today is that because there are going to be a lot more people involved, a lot more corporates involved, there are going to be new areas and new opportunities which will get discovered, because it's no longer restricted to a few cliche topics that people have focused on in the area of CSR in the past. A lot more new areas and opportunities will emerge, I think, in light of the new government order and a lot more people getting involved. One of the greatest benefits or the strengths that this participation from the corporate world will bring is that I think the corporates have been running businesses for a long period of time, and I think there is a whole lot of learning that people will be able to transpose from the corporate world into this space of CSR and bring a lot more directions, a lot more management principles that they can apply here and make it a lot more meaningful exercise going forward, which essentially will lead to the next point, which is a whole lot of result oriented approach. So it's no longer just going to be about giving something away. I think a whole lot of discussion will happen now about what is it that's going to happen as a result of this. Who are the beneficiaries? How is it benefiting? Is there methods to measure them and take things forward? I think the whole initiative of lot more people getting involved in this exercise is going to lead to a whole new paradigm of contribution that will happen towards the development goals of the country. It is no longer going to be restricted to just the government trying to see what other developmental goals need to be fulfilled. I think corporates will get involved and it will lead to a lot more healthier and better environment. In the past, a lot of social initiatives have taken place and they've kind of gone unnoticed. And I think this initiative will now give a platform where there will be recognition for a lot of work that has been done in the past by the corporate world who were not getting the due recognition. I think this will now give an opportunity for all of those initiatives also to be recognized and maybe carried forward and developed further. One of the key things I think in the social sector that the panel felt today is lacking is that there isn't a method to measure how things are being done. There is no method to monitor and report, and I think the corporate involvement will bring in, because no corporate today can exist without the mechanisms to measure, monitor and report. So I think one of the things that hopefully they will bring into this is to be able to bring methods to measure, monitor and report, and create a far more transparent and better management structures to drive these over a long period of time. Meaning everyone is looking at methods that these can be run over a sustainable period of time, and I think transparency and some of these management principles coming in from the corporate world will help take this forward. And last but not the least, in fact, one of the most critical factors is going to be a lot of application of technology. I think this has been one area where the corporate world has benefited tremendously over the past few decades, and we are hoping that now with their corporate involvement into this initiative, a lot of those technology will now be brought into the CSR environment to make this whole ecosystem such that it can sustain, it can give higher visibility and create a far better mechanism of monitoring and managing. So those were some of the strengths that we felt as a panel when we were discussing. Nothing is complete without some weaknesses. So I guess some of the weaknesses that we as a panel identified, that the government order currently is silent or can create kind of imbalances from a segmentation standpoint. So it doesn't really specify how one will look at the segmentation, either from a geographic standpoint or from a theme or a cause standpoint or from a target standpoint in terms of who in the community are we trying to benefit. So I think it will probably be a good idea in terms of getting a little more clarity, and there is a bit of weakness around this area. The other thing we felt as a panel is that the connect between the government reform measures and the CSR is not coming through in the manner that we think it should come through, both in terms of before the infusion of either capital or time from the corporate world or otherwise. So I think that's something that is a bit of an inherent weakness in the government order as it exists today. The other thing we felt as a panel is that trying to be prescriptive might lead to lack of innovations, because sometimes human tendency is that these are activities which we would rather do out of free will and not out of some order that we've been told. So we feel that because it's a little prescriptive, it might lead to lack of innovation somewhere. And as I started the discussion around, we felt that there is a whole lot of gaps in the understanding and confusion by all stakeholders, and there is a need for all stakeholders to come together and get a lot more clarity in terms of how we should go forward. Last but not the least, the weakness we felt is that corporates, by and large, with the exception of a few corporates, have not really been involved in the corporate social responsibility area, and they might not really have the knowledge required about on the ground developmental needs that exist both in the urban or the rural area, and that might lead to some amount of imbalance that might happen because they don't understand this space well enough. So these were some of the weaknesses that we felt as a group going into the discussion today. Okay, moving on. As a group, again, we discussed about the opportunities that exist going forward in light of the new government order, and we had a very heated discussion around that, and initially we came out with, I think, about a list of 12 opportunities, and then we spent some time around trying to identify the top few, because one of the learnings from the corporate world is you really can't do too many all at once. So we felt we will prioritize some of the opportunities that exist and focus on the top few, and here we are presenting what we think are the top few based on the panel discussion. One of them is that I think there is opportunity around organizing and channeling the entire resources that are available in this space towards development. I think this government order will help us bring all of these together, put a direction, put a vision, put a common goal around all this, so that it becomes a lot more unified activity. It becomes an activity which becomes a catalyst in terms of development going forward. So clearly we see that as a big opportunity. I think the other thing that we discussed is that we feel that this is not an activity which will happen in isolation. Once we start some of these activities from the corporate world and getting involved in these CSR activities, I think it will lead to what typically is seen in the corporate world as the forward and the backward integration, and a lot more spin-offs will happen, which will lead to higher education, maybe higher employability, and these were just some examples we could discuss in the panel. But a lot more spin-offs will happen, and the movement will spread to involve a lot more people who will get involved. Also, it will lead to a lot more development of new models for governance, and this will probably catalyze the entire model and enable the government to focus on this area a lot better. And I think this we see as a fairly large opportunity over the next few years, where corporate world will bring in a lot more method of governance, teach people who are involved in this how this can be done better. Clearly a very, very large opportunity. I think there have been, it's not as if with the government getting involved, this is something that's going to happen afresh. There is a whole lot of work that has gone into the social sector, and the government has been leading a lot of programs. And I think the opportunity is for the corporates to learn from what has been going on in a lot of these government programs. And I think it's only natural that it will happen, that the best practices will get picked and replicated and duplicated, and some of the learnings which will come out of the government projects will get corrected when programs are implemented on a much larger basis. I think this new initiative or this new movement by the government will also lead to unifying the stakeholders, and I think not just at a very high level, but going down to the granular level in terms of defining how and what will get measured, how is it going to happen, who's going to do what, and these are things that corporates are very, very used to doing. And I think the whole involvement of all the stakeholders will create an environment which will be very, very unified, and will get down to the smallest level of smallest unit of governance in this, which will bring in a whole lot of structure. And I think clearly there is an opportunity around technology. Corporate world has benefited out of this, and I think that, like I spoke earlier, is a great opportunity for us as a country to apply some of those technology. The world today talks about India as one of the technology hubs, and I think it's time we brought a whole lot of technology into the social sector. So that's again another clear opportunity as we see in this initiative. There are, like everything else in life, there are some threats that exist. And I guess, one of the things that we felt as a panel is that because now it has been prescribed, it shouldn't become something that becomes like a ritual going forward, that this is something I have to do, and that could possibly be a threat. So there is a need to overcome that, and that threat is very real and it exists. The other threat we felt is that some of these initiatives, I guess the energy levels at the beginning might be quite high, and then as the project kind of progresses, it could lead to either a decay or a short close of the initiative, and which could be detrimental. And as a panel, we kind of spent some time discussing around that, and we felt the easier route to choose between the devil and the deep sea could be the short close, but the bigger worry or bigger threat is a decay that could happen in some of these projects, which would last over a longer period of time. Change, as they say, is never easy, and I guess even in this particular area there is likely to be resistance from the stakeholders, and we see that as one of the threats for people to absorb some of these new initiatives when the corporates will take to new areas, new geographies. So that's a threat that we've got to be aware of. Anything that happens in the government always has a threat about change of government leading to some policy changes or policy reversal in the worst case scenario, and that's a real threat because this is an initiative led by the politics of the organization. So there is a threat revolving around that. It's a new area that is going to get developed, and I guess it's in very, very early stages of evolution. So it's very, very important that the risk scenarios need to be built in, because today we are saying the sustainability of this whole project is dependent on a certain level of funding coming in from the corporate world, and I guess the economic variations that could happen either at a corporate level or at an industry level, or in the worst case scenario at a country or a global level, do tend to have risks that are associated. And I guess in the models that get built, one will have to be aware and build all of these risk scenarios and be aware of them. And I guess at the end of the day, it is very, very important that the people who are around funding these and owning some of these projects need to be very clear, and there is a threat that who are the people who are going to get involved, who are the people who are going to own these or fund these, and there is a threat revolving around that. So these were some of the threats that we felt as a group, and having done this challenge or these SWOT analysis around this new initiative, we tried to then identify that what are some of the challenges that need to be overcome or that need to be focused on for us to kind of take this initiative to the next level. And here we are presenting some of the challenges that the panel felt are very, very important. We talked about the fact that there are going to be multiple stakeholders, and I think one of the greatest challenges is going to be to bring about a unified understanding between all stakeholders. We certainly don't want different stakeholders to be involved in this project, having different levels of understanding or different levels of expectations coming out of that. So one of the challenges clearly is to bring all stakeholders together, not just in terms of bringing them together, but also in terms of their thinking that they need to be together. And that is one of the challenges that will have to be overcome for this project to take forward. There is a whole gap between the corporate world and the community, and quite often the two don't kind of go together, and I think that's a challenge that we will have to overcome in terms of bringing the two together. That here is an initiative where the corporate world is also going to get involved in the community activities, and it is no longer the cliche in terms of corporates are not involved in community development, they are only focused on profit generation for themselves. So here is a challenge that in this new government order, how do we bring that together and bridge the gap? There is very clearly a balance required, because there is innovation that is going to be required in this particular area. There is going to be new models that will need to be developed. But having said that, there is a mass application of these models that need to happen across, especially a country like India. So where do we find the right balance between a model which can be very easily repeated and taken to multiple geographies or multiple sectors, and how do we create very local and very customized solutions so that the community getting benefited out of this feels that this is a solution meant for them and for their particular specific needs. So we've got to find the right balance, because if we do only one, the other one is likely to suffer. There is a need for a whole lot of information dissemination that needs to happen. People need to be made aware. There is a need for awareness to go up around this activity, because a lot of people are suddenly going to start finding that why are corporates coming in, what is it that they are trying to do here. So it is important that the information overflow or information flow is going and reaching all the right people over a period of time. Any new initiative, when it starts, typically tends to have very high level of energy, and this initiative is not going to be any different. But over a period of time, people will start developing fatigue, and it is important for the entire ecosystem to be developed such that the developmental fatigue doesn't set in, and in a few years we don't see this as a decay of the entire initiative. So we've got to keep the whole initiative running. It is very, very important for the long-term sustainability of this whole initiative that there needs to be financial and operational sustainability. So there is a need for that challenge to be overcome, that people need to understand what is it that is required, both from a funding standpoint and also from implementing some of these projects on the ground level. So that sustainability needs to be worked on and developed over a long period of time. All of these projects might, while the corporates might start or seed, but eventually needs to be owned by the community, by people who are involved in that activity. So in that sense, we've got to find a method by which the eventual ownership is established, and that eventual owner is involved in the exercise, probably ideally from the beginning itself, so that then the smooth transition can happen to the eventual owner. And that's a very, very important challenge for this project or for this initiative to lead to long-term benefits over a sustainable period of time. So if these are some of the challenges, I think as a group, we kind of spend some time discussing what are some of the initiatives or some of the recommended solutions that we can talk about for people who are involved in the policy making in this area to kind of look at and be aware of. We identified 6 areas or 6 initiatives that we think are important to overcome some of the challenges that we talked about. Very clearly, there is a need for a knowledge base to be created around what are the different developmental models that exist, and this does not necessarily need to be restricted only to some work done by the government. It is across board, across geographies, maybe even from an international perspective. What are some of the models that exist? How have they worked? What have been the pitfalls? What have been the gains coming out of that? There is very clearly a need to build a knowledge base which we can then rely on, lean on, learn from, and kind of take things forward. So that's the initiative we think very, very important. There is a very clear need to build technology, because we talked about the fact that these initiatives should not be seen as something which people are doing more out of an obligation, but these are initiatives that should be taken from a long-term developmental need perspective. So there is a need to develop technology which can help all stakeholders get involved, and more importantly, use methods using technology to be able to measure, report, and kind of transmit to all stakeholders that this is the status of the particular project, this is where it stands, this is how we see going forward, these are the measurables that we are getting out of that, so that everyone is aware and it doesn't lead to different people looking at the same project from different perspectives because there isn't enough data available. So there is very clearly a need to build this platform which will help everyone benefit and be aware of the project, of the initiative. This project involves large amount of funding. These initiatives will involve a large amount of money being deployed, and there is a need to develop more innovative financial initiatives that should happen, because economies will change, companies objectives and profitability will keep changing, the needs of the community will keep changing, a lot of dynamics will happen, and there is a need to have a more innovative financial model and financial initiatives that need to be developed, so that different people, including the government, are aware when and at what stage they need to get involved and what are the risks that they need to play a role to mitigate going forward. Just like it has happened in a lot of other areas where government has tried to work on improving governance, I think this initiative will also need a single window. There is a need for a creation of a method by which all the stakeholders can be unified, and there is a single window that can then operate as the interface between the corporate world and the government, so that all the efforts are channelized. and there is a need here for nodal agencies to kind of emerge, who can then play this role of a single window clearance between the corporate world and the government. And I think this is something which we very clearly see as emerging as time goes by. Any new initiative needs a whole lot of knowledge, a whole lot of thinking, and I think it's important that we get the whole academic environment involved here. So there is a need for an academic interface which will then help build a whole lot of new emerging knowledge that can then be applied and used, and more importantly also help build resources that can then be deployed in this area going forward, because there is a need for a new set of people who will then need to come in and join these initiatives. So I think academicians will play a very, very important role going forward, and that's an initiative I think which is very, very important for this initiative going forward. I think, if we as a country are able to do what we set out to do using this government initiative, I think it will throw up a whole lot of learning which I think can be used by policymakers to look at future a lot better, and I think make governance a lot better in terms of how we involve a lot more people in the decision making, how do we involve the ultimate beneficiary in the decision making of how it needs to be implemented. And I think it has a potential for a lot of use in the governance going forward. I would at this stage like to hand over to my colleague Dr. Anant Mani, who will take us through some of the case studies that have happened around this area from where we can learn. Dr. Mani.
Thank you, Vivek. CSR is not a new initiative as such. It has been historically been implemented by a number of corporates. Over time it has evolved, and there are a number of good examples which has either been done in the corporate world or in the neighborhood institutions, which have evolved as national models as well as global models. So some of them I would like to bring before you, which can set as models for replication. The best one I would say is the Gujarat cooperative model, which brought a whole new meaning to the cooperative movement in India, which looked beyond social development into economic models that can sustain on their own. The IRMA is a classic example where the students are the future cooperative employees are being trained, and this is one model that can be used by CSR for replication. One other example that I know of personally is a company which is the Indian Detonators Limited, which went into this area of supporting irrigation for sugarcane production. Over time, sugarcane production improved, but what happened was the concept has also evolved over time. They moved from irrigation to dryland agriculture area, and today there is an institution which is standalone outside the ideal, which is beyond the Indian detonators, which is becoming a global model of coarse cereal production in dryland agriculture area. So this is a spin-off which originally no one envisaged at the stage of the CSR initiative, but over the 3 decades it has now become a global model. Similarly, number of incubation labs where ideas have germinated, and this has become to come to be implemented as models and has supported the new policy initiatives of government. The watershed programs of NABARD is one best example where NABARD moved out of the thinking of supporting the program financially, but they went into supporting the institutions that were implementing the watersheds. This over a period of time became so positive with the community participation that it is now sustaining across the country, and it is moved also to beyond the country. Now, where do we go from here? Optimistically looking, 5 years from now, CSR should have created new partnerships, which is bringing all the different stakeholders into common line of thinking and improve their sort of understanding for each other, and more importantly, respect for each other. And critically, many social programs become economically viable because CSR will look at the development not merely as a social input but also sustainable economic input. New business models will emerge, which has not only to look at the growth of this particular sector, but the environment around it and the community around it. Funds should become more easily available for social development, because at this point of time it is considered as a liability, but when there is an economic model emerging around it, then it becomes all the more interesting for everybody to commit in investments. More importantly, the demographic advantage India has will help for increased participation of youth, especially women, and this will emerge as a new business opportunity. And 25 years, this will be, CSR should sort of look at global objectives, look beyond India, creating, because if we can go to the Mars, then we should also look at the planet in the green way, and we will have set new indices for measurement, and happiness index will be one such area which is going to emerge. And probably India will set into motion a new concept of CSR for all the global partners to see, learn and imitate.
I'm back again. I would like to first of all, on behalf of LASIB Hyderabad chapter, like to thank all the panelists who've put in all this effort. They took almost about 3 years, and after seeing the crystal gazing 25 years from now, I think I'm a very happy person, and I'm sure the corporates are also going to be, equally happy about this. I think as a corporate, what we are now looking at is what are the next steps. Where is the structure? Where is the method to this madness? Can I have it in pointers? Like, if I have 2% and I'm ready to invest, so then what will be my first step? How am I going to take forward the CSR initiatives so that the organization gets benefit, my participation as an employee and an employer is benefited, and of course the society at large is benefited. So what LASIB has done now is we will be coming up with more and more such recordings from our panelists, since they are now part of the team, and we'll keep posting more and more such recordings for the larger global audience. I, on behalf of LASIB Hyderabad chapter, Vanita Sehgal, chairperson, would like to sign off now. Thank you. Have a lovely day.